We have on the line with us Representative Dan Sullivan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hannah. Glad to be here.
So, Dan, we've been spending this first hour talking about the student debt crisis and how that's impacting, especially my generation. And so, what kind of insight do you have to give into this issue?
Well, just completely agree. The students and our quest for a higher education, people are willing to go out on a limb and sacrifice a lot of their future by taking out student loans that they're unable to repay. I think it has a lot to do with what our colleges are marketing. I've seen several recent articles in various papers around the state that we are no longer, or not necessarily, marketing education as the reason young people should go to college. One of the things that they're marketing is the quality of life and a lifestyle, college experience. So apparently our universities are starting to market people to come to college just for the fact that they need to have that, quote, college experience. And they are taking out loans and investing their money in a quality of life issue. And that really concerns me that we are now losing our focus on the value of a college education and strictly the educational part of that.
Well, so absolutely. So in my research on all the student loan debt and, what brought us to this crisis point that we're at, colleges and universities are the biggest lobby present with continuing this type of practice, if you will, and maybe why, the legislator, federally or state, haven't addressed the issue.
Well, frame that again for me. So, when you talk about colleges and universities lobbying, I don't know that I would necessarily call it lobbying. I think it's a lot of marketing. They spend a lot of their money and time and energy trying to get students to come and stay at the universities. I know the retention rate of our universities is starting to go down. In other words, we are able to attract them, and we attract them with scholarships, with money from other avenues that we use to entice students to come. And then once they come, we have a hard time retaining them. But the lure of the marketing dollar is very, very strong. I'm the chair of the House Education Committee on Higher Education. And I've met several times with our higher ed folks, the lobbyists or the marketers there. We were paying our lobbyists, our college lobbyists, with taxpayer dollars. And I met with our lobbyists at the different universities, and they have changed that now, where we are no longer using taxpayer dollars to pay for the lobbyists for our universities. Now they call them by something different. They call them liaisons and give them a different title, but effectively they're lobbyists. And we should not be using taxpayer dollars to pay for those lobbyists. But again, to go back to my point, I think it's just really huge marketing that our universities use that has caused the college lifestyle and the college campus atmosphere for our students to think they can go into debt. And it's necessary for them to go into debt to have the, quote, college experience. And then they come out with a degree that doesn't necessarily pay them enough to pay back the student loans that they've taken out for that degree. Does that kind of fit along with your experience in college?
Oh, absolutely. So to give you a little context in my background, so I went to college for an education. I come from a very definition of a middle-class family, and I knew that I wanted to do something that required a professional degree. So college was absolutely necessary for me. And so I was there for an education. But while I was there, I wasn't going to miss out on experiences. So I guess you could kind of lump me into that category. But, of course, me and my husband both, we were involved in Greek life. And, we'll both tell you that was an incredibly rewarding experience. And we wouldn't trade it for the world. But it was a byproduct of us being there for our education. We both had to go to school to get an education, and we just got involved while we were there. But several of our friends, for whatever reason, maybe they had family businesses, etc., this, that, and the other. And some of them even came to college and then went to trade school to do something else. They came
Absolutely.
they came strictly for the 4-year experience, because that's what your parents did. Your parents, rushed XYZ sorority, fraternity, and they had the best time of their life. And so they wanted their kids to have that too. And that's awesome because you make good networking connections, but it's essentially, not beneficial if you're not going to use it for your education.
Well, I think I agree with you. Hear what you're saying. The education is the primary reason you go to school. And there are other, as you said, byproducts of that, the networking, the other opportunities that open up to you, broaden your horizon. All of those things are critically important to one professionally as they develop throughout their years. That's one of the problems our universities are having right now is they've overpriced their product. I think in previous generations, the product was education with a byproduct of the college life and college experience. But now the universities are charging so much for their that experience and for the education that students just can't afford it anymore. Now when you go to universities, the fees are tacked on. All the other things besides education have almost outpriced them. And I think students think and parents and those that take advantage of that, the opportunities that are afforded you to a college education are still there. But the expenses that are tacked on are tending not to be worth it. So a lot of students now are going to online education. They can get the value of the educational component without all of the fees and other extras that go along with that. They may even live in a college community and take online courses. So I think that's a big part of what the escalating costs have been at a university, that people just can't, your return on your investment, ROI, return on investment, just is not as good as it once used to be. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. So you made a good point that kids are going to online to avoid paying fees because, of course, it's been passed in Arkansas, or they capped tuition, but of course that didn't cap fees. So, where tuition doesn't raise, fees raise. And that happened while I was in college. But
that was a little sneaky, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and, for
tuition, but let the fees increase. So guess what universities did?
They increased fees.
Yeah, and guess what happened this year? When the governor asked colleges to hold tight on tuition, they did for a year or two, but as soon as that request left, they upped that tuition and the fees.
Absolutely.
The cost of education continues to escalate, and people just are having to make a decision, is it worth it? Again, you just eventually, you price yourself out of a product that people have value to.
Well, and so here's another thing, colleges are historically, currently, however you want to phrase it, indoctrination schools. So not only are we paying for this overpriced education, but we're paying to be indoctrinated by, some one-sided professors who want to, rather than encourage free thinking, they want to encourage you to think like they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you hear this all the time. If you, and this is where I have a big problem with universities overselling their campus life versus their education. If you're going to go pay for a campus life, I, as a taxpayer, I'm not willing to subsidize your campus life on a liberal university. And of course, Arkansas State is a pretty good example. You were among those who fought hard at Arkansas State University to get rid of free speech zones. And eventually we had a bill that we passed, and I was fortunate to be one of the sponsors of that got rid of those free speech zones. But that attitude is very typical on our university campuses, even in a state that is so-called a conservative state like Arkansas. So why would we as taxpayers choose to fund a lifestyle, a college experience that subsidizes that liberal college experience? And I don't think legislators and taxpayers are very willing to go on and forward with that. And I'll tie into this, Hannah. You hear a lot of this talk now. Two very prominent phrases are quality of life. We want our communities to have quality of life issues. And it sounds real good. It's a real good phrase, but what does that mean? And now you're hearing that tied into college funding. We want our college students to have a really good quality of life. And that's starting to take a little precedent over a quality education. The other phrase that you hear a lot of now is we want to have public-private partnerships. And again, that sounds really good. But what does that mean? Does that mean our universities are now going to partner with private entities, and the private entities can now benefit greatly financially from using public money? I hope your listeners will start to be really attuned to those quality of life phrases and those public-private partnership phrases, because essentially they're after the public dollar. That's the bottom line. And we really need to be careful when we start really applauding these efforts at a public-private partnership, because you have the government, again, deciding where your money is going to go. It ends up in increased taxes. We're seeing that in Jonesboro right now.
Well, that was going to be my point. Quality of life has been a big phrase in your district coming up. But I think you make a good point that these are taxpayer-funded issues. And so what people may not understand is the student loans that you take out, when you're 18, 19 years old, they're all federally subsidized. I mean, they're taxpayer dollars. Of course you can, call Wells Fargo, apply for a loan there, but kids don't have any credit. And so the way that you borrow a loan when you're 18, 19 from the government, it doesn't depend on your credit. It doesn't depend on, you've got a great history of paying back your loans. They don't know anything about you. And all that burden is now put on the taxpayers.
Yeah, and that's another example of a public-private partnership. I mean, the government is essentially loaning out the money, and they're, of course, they have their network of banks and access to money. But that's another good example of using the public's money to fund college students into debt. And going into debt is never a good idea and should be avoided at all costs. But it's so easy and so enticing. And we're in an environment now of give me what I want right now. I don't want to wait. I want it now. Give it to me. I'm willing to go into debt. I'm willing to take other people's money from them. When we go into these public-private partnerships, and our universities are trending that way, but and using the taxpayer dollar to do that, we're essentially saying we want to take other people's money so that college students can have what they want right now, and we'll go into debt to do it.
Absolutely.
It's really a bad idea. In the long run, it just doesn't prove to be worthy.
Absolutely. And so, quality of life, my definition, even as a millennial for quality of life is I want to be out of debt. I want no debt, and I want to accumulate wealth so that I can do these things I want. But student loan debt stops you from the beginning. So the minute you graduate college, it's all about climbing yourself out of that hole to even just break even so that you can essentially start living your life. So it's an interesting argument that they call it quality of life when really in the long run it's hindering your quality of life.
Listen, I tell you what, I couldn't have said it better, and I'm going to borrow that statement. When you talk about quality of life, one of the most important qualities in life is staying out of debt. Boy, amen to that. And I hope our young people and people that are considering going into debt start to combine that thought and bring that together, quality of life means paying your way as you go. Quality of life means being able to have the patience to earn what you get. Quality of life means having a strong foundation educationally that will take you forward in your life. And unfortunately, quality of life is becoming, give it to me right now. It's so important that I have it right now. I'll go into debt or I'll take your money. You know, Northeast Arkansas right now, where, again, I know the audience is from all over our state, but all of our communities are going to be going into these issues and facing these. You know, this community has a pool. Our community can't compete because they have a pool, so we're going to raise our taxes and we're going to build a pool or a university, or we're going to build university facilities. So that just creates that competitive model that now the other communities are going to have to raise their taxes. And we get into this spiral of raising taxes to improve our, quote, quality of life, where we just continually go into debt rather than take a long-term perspective of let's pay as we go, give people freedom to spend their money as they choose, and let that drive what our community looks like. And that's getting more and more difficult to do.
Absolutely. Well, Representative Sullivan, this has been incredibly insightful, and I thank you so much for coming on the show with me today on Johnny Cash Friday. So we'll talk with you soon.
Great. I thank you, Hannah. Have a good day.
You too.